Okay, everyone, we're going to start chapter 3. We're going to be looking at percents and ratios and rates in this chapter. We're going to start with a really tough section. People often have troubles with this. We're going to convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. We got to go from fractions to decimals and fractions to percents and decimals to fractions and decimals to percents and percents to fractions and percents to decimals. There's 6 different conversions you need to be able to make, and people find this tough. What makes it especially strange is we haven't even talked about percents yet. So we'll get more into percents next day, but I thought this might be a nice transition from fractions, which we've been doing in chapter 2. So basically what a percent is, it's a fraction. It's a fraction where it's out of 100. So for example, if you write a test and you end up getting 73% on the test, it means you got the equivalent of 73 out of 100. Now it doesn't mean the test was out of 100, maybe your test was only out of 27 or something, but it means if it had been out of 100, that's the mark you would have gotten. So basically that's what percent means, out of 100. We'll talk more about that in the next video. Alright, let's start converting. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to convert percents to fractions. Well, I just kind of gave it away. Percent means out of 100. So if it's 20%, guess what it is? It is 20 out of 100. What you're going to do is put the fraction over 100 and simplify if necessary. It's that simple. Every time you see a percent, just make it out of 100. 20%, 20 out of 100. Now, we'd like our fractions to be in lowest terms, and this is not in lowest terms. One thing I noticed is they both end in 0. So what could I divide them both by? 10. If I divide them by 10, I have 2 and 10. Now they're both even, so I could still divide them by 2. So maybe I'll show this. I divided by 10 and divided by 10, and now I'm going to divide by 2 and divide by 2. You could have divided by 20 and done it all in one step, by the way. 2 divided by 2, 1. 10 divided by 2, 5. There's your answer. 20% is the same as 1 over 5. Okay, let's do another one. 13.3%. Whenever we see percent, we just put it over 100. 13.3 over 100. Now, this one, we don't really want to have a fraction with a decimal in it. That's kind of ugly. So, do you know what you can do to move that decimal? We want to get that decimal moved over here. We could either just move it one spot and do the same to the bottom, or the other way we can think of this is multiplying it by 10. If you multiply by 10, it moves the decimal one spot. What you do to the top, do to the bottom. So on the top, you would multiply by 10 or move the decimal one spot and you get 133. And you got to do the same on the bottom. Multiply by 10 and you get 1,000. Or if you want, take the decimal, which is right here, it's at the end, and move it one spot. We got to have something in that empty spot. You put a 0 in there. Whichever way you do it, this is your answer, and that's in lowest terms. You can't simplify this any further. Okay, last one. We have 0.007%. Wow, that's a tiny amount. What do you do when you have percents? You put it over 100. 0.007 over 100. Again, we do not want to have decimals in our fraction. So what you're going to do is you're going to move that decimal 1, 2, 3 spots. Or if you want, you're going to multiply by 1,000 this time. Anyway, when you move it over 3 spots, you now end up with 7 on the top. But wait, if you're going to move the decimal 3 spots on the top, you got to move the decimal, so there's the decimal, 1, 2, 3 spots on the bottom. And you're going to put zeros in there, right? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. It's a big number on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. 0.007% is the same as 7 over 100,000. Okay, that's how you go from percent to fraction. What if you started at percent and you wanted to go to a decimal? It's actually kind of even easier. You just move the decimal 2 spaces to the left. So 43%, where's the decimal? I don't see a decimal in 43%. If you don't see it, it's at the end, so there's the decimal. And you just move that decimal 2 to the left. 1, 2. So now the decimal is right here. So your answer is 0.43. Or just 0.43 if you want, but I like to put the 0 there. 2%, where's the decimal? After the 2, but we move it 2 spaces to the left. So we're going to go 1, 2, that's my new decimal. I have a space right there. Got to put a 0 in there. So you're going to have 0.02 or 0.02. And the last one, there's my decimal. I move it 2 spots to the left. 1, 2, oh, it's going to be 0.587 or 0.587. So that's not too bad. Well, if percent to decimal is moving it 2 to the left, guess what you do for decimal to percent? You move it 2 to the right. So we can do this. If this is our decimal and we want to write it as a percent, we just find the decimal, and here it is right here. We move it 2 to the right. 1, 2. The decimal is now after the 3. So we have 83 and then our decimal. We don't even need to put the decimal in this case. And it's 83%. Don't forget your percent sign. 2.1, we're going to move that decimal 2 spots. 1, 2. Here's the new decimal. Well, wait, I got a space right here. What goes in the space? A 0. So you have 210%. Yes, percents can be more than 100%. We'll talk about that in the classes ahead. All right, let's go to the back. Now we're going to go from decimal to fraction. We're starting to get a little harder here. So my advice with decimal to fraction is to think of place value. You know your place values? It goes like after the 0. If I had a decimal like 0.18762, this 1 is in the 10th position. This 8 is in the 100th position. This 7 is in the 1000th position. This 6 is in the 10,000th position. The 2 is in the 100,000th position. Okay, so this 3, here's our decimal. We want to switch to a fraction. Look at the last number, the 3. What position that's in? That's in the 100th position. So basically what this is 53 hundredths. 53 hundredths. Oh, that's it. Okay, once you figure out the place value, that's your bottom number. So look at this one. What place value is that 7 in? Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Oh, the last number is thousand. Top number, just the 7. This is 7 1,000ths. Okay, how about fraction to percent? Oh, you just have to multiply by 100. That's not too bad. So if we have 7 over 10, all we have to do to figure out what that is as a percent is to multiply 7 over 10 times 100. Remember how to multiply fractions? We could make this 100 over 1. You could even put that up here if you want for your steps. Multiply by 100 over 1. And now you can ninja slice, right? What can you ninja slice? The 10 and the 100 can both be divided by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 100 divided by 10 is 10. And that's it. So now we can multiply. Across the top, 7 times 10 is 70. 1 times 1 is 1. Well, wait a minute. 70 over 1, that's just the same as 70. And that's our answer. 70% is the answer. Okay, let's try this one. 3 3/4, and we want to multiply it by 100. Okay, couple things. First, when we multiply, we can't have mixed fractions. It has to be improper. So let's get this improper. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15. So we have 15 over 4 times our 100, which we could write as 100 over 1. Ninja slice, the 4 and the 100. You can divide them both by 4. 4 by 4 is 1, and 100 by 4 is 25. Now you're good to go. You can actually multiply here. So on the bottom is easy. You just have 1. On the top, 15 times 25 equals 375. So 375 over 1 is just 375, and it is a percent. So there you go. And finally, fraction to decimal. Well, think about it. In a fraction, like 3 over 5, what does this line mean right here? It literally means divide. So that's how you're going to change it to a decimal. You're just going to divide, as suggested by the fraction line. You're going to take your calculator and go 3 divided by 5. So here's an online calculator we could use, and I'll go 3 divided by 5. Look, it writes it as a fraction even, and over here it gives the answer 0.6. So that is what the answer is as a decimal. Okay, now those were 6 different conversions, and you're going to have to fill in a chart like this. But if there's some of those conversions you didn't like, you can avoid them. Say you don't like going decimal to fraction. Well, you could go decimal to percent and then percent to fraction. So, there are some ways around this. All right, let's go fraction we're starting with. Well, why don't we just do what we just did, fraction to decimal. That's not too bad. How do we do it? We used our calculator. We divided, right? 1 divided by 8. Let's start there. So here we go. 1 divided by 8, and my answer shows up here. 0.125. Great, I'll write that. 0.125. Now, do you remember how to go from decimal to percent? Decimal to percent, you just move the decimal 2 spots to the right. So if I move it 2 spots to the right, I end up with 12.5%. Hey, why don't we do that with this one too? We're going decimal to percent again. Move it over 2 to the right. 1, 2, 57%. Okay, now we have to get fraction. We could do decimal to fraction. Think of your place values, tenths, hundredths. So this is 57 hundredths. Or, since we know the percent, remember what percent means? It means out of 100. So 57 out of 100. There we go. Okay, we could do that for this one too. It's 26%, which means 26 out of 100. And by the way, we should make sure they're in lowest terms. This one is in lowest terms, this one isn't. You can divide top and bottom by 2. 26 by 2 is 13. 100 by 2 is 50. So that's our best answer here. Decimal. Well, you could take your calculator and go 13 divided by 50, and that would give you the answer. Or you could go from here. Remember what we do if we're going percent to decimal? Move the decimal 2 to the left. So where's our decimal in 26? Right here. If we move it 2 to the left, 1, 2, you get 0.26. I like putting the 0 in front, so 0.26. Okay, decimal to percent. Again, we've done that a few times. You move the decimal 2 to the right. 1, 2. Uh-oh, we got a space. What goes in there? A 0. So you end up with 30%. Okay, so you could now use the percent here. 30% means 30 out of 100. And let's put it in lowest terms. Divide them both by 10. Knock a 0 off both of them. You get 3 out of 10. You also could have gone from decimal to fraction by thinking of place value. This 3 is in the tenths position, so it's 3/10. Done. Percent to decimal, we move the decimal 2 to the left. 1, 2. So you get the decimal up front. 0.122. 0.122 or 0.122. And then decimal to fraction, you could think of place value. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So it's 122 over 1,000. Or you could have made this 12.2 over 100. 12.2 over 100. If you'd done that, you would have had to move the decimal 1 to the right here to get 122, and 1 to the right here to get 1,000. So either way you do it, you're going to get 122 over 1,000. But you're not done, because you can divide both of those by 2. If you divide 122 by 2, you get 61. Feel free to use a calculator. And if you divide 1,000 by 2, you get 500. Okay, the last one. 8 over 11. Let's change that to a decimal. How do we do that? We think about, what does this sign mean right here? That line means divide. So let's go to our calculator and go 8 divided by 11. 8 divided by 11. Whoa, look what we get. 0.7272727273. This last 3, it's just because they're rounding. It actually goes 727272727272. It just keeps going 7272. This is a repeating decimal. So how do we do this? Have you dealt with these before? The answer is 0.72727272. So you do not write down 0.72727272. No, you only write down the part that repeats. And what's repeating here over and over and over is the 72. So we only need to write that down. That part, the part that repeats, is called the repetend, by the way. I just learned that recently. Pretty cool. And the way that you show that that's the part that repeats, in Canada, the way we do it, is we draw a line, a horizontal line, across the ones that repeat. So 0.72, we put a line over both of them because they're both repeating. By the way, that horizontal line also has a name, cool name. It's the vinculum. Love it. Okay, so you draw a vinculum on the 0.72, and that's your decimal right there. Okay, now how do we do the percent? Remember, to go from decimal to percent, we move that decimal 2 to the right. So it would be 72 point, but then what happens there? Okay, well maybe I should write for a second 0.7272727272, because that's what happens, right? 7272, it just keeps going like that. So if I move the decimal to the right, 1, 2, the decimal's now here. So what do I have? I have 72.72727272. Okay, so I have 72 in front of the decimal, and then after the decimal I have 72 repeating. The repetend is 72, and the vinculum goes over the 7 and the 2. Gotta love those terms. Just to give you one more example of repeating decimals, if I had a decimal like 0.56314314314314314 ... keeps going like that. How would I write that? I would go 0.56314, and the repetend is 314. That's the only part that's repeating, is the 314. So my horizontal line would only go over the 3, the 1, and the 4. Okay? So practice this. It is hard to go from fraction to decimal to percent to decimal, etc., etc. There's so many rules that can get a little bit, mixed up. You could write them in your 50-cent book though, people. So give that a try and let me know if you have any difficulties. As always, I'm here to help. See ya.